I'm Tyler Tyson, and my team members Leah Spinner, Ray Black, Ben Newman, and Chip Benton and I will be presenting to you today on preventing nuclear terror. We will inform you on what nuclear terror is, how do we secure nuclear materials, how do we detect threats and missiles, determining whether a threat is harmless, how the government will communicate, and how will we find the perpetrator. Nuclear terror is the use of nuclear weapons to create large-scale explosions which have the potential to terrorize an entire nation and surrounding nations. These nuclear weapons can be created using hydrogen, uranium, or plutonium. These bombs create extreme damage to affect an area within the radius of the bomb.
The best way to secure nuclear materials will be to eliminate all nuclear usable weapons, but that's impossible. The next best thing will be to reduce stockpiles of nuclear usable weapons, also to engineer a database to keep track of all the nuclear materials in the plant in each country. The NTI Index does this already to a certain extent and has evidence of countries reducing their stockpiles of nuclear usable weapons since it was created. Also, to ensure protection and prevention of smuggling these materials, it would be useful to have detectors at each plant to notify someone of the varying measurements and be prepared to take actions to handle the situations. One more way to secure the materials would be to create more sensitive security scans to nuclear material for large exports and imports.
X-ray scanners are currently used in high-risk places such as airports to detect explosives at a short distance. Fast neutrons will soon replace these scanners when fully researched, and the Department of Defense will try to use them to detect weapons at a distance. Fast neutrons will be better optimized to reach long distances because they resist electromagnetic forces.
While classic missile defense systems that are in constant development in many countries would be extremely useful in disabling airborne threats, they would be of no use in dealing with threats that were delivered and detonated on the ground. Remotely neutralizing such devices would require a great deal of research, as currently theorized means of doing so would imply high-energy neutrino beams, which, even in an ideal situation requiring years of development, would still have many drawbacks, such as an enormous cost and energy needs. These devices would detonate the device at roughly a 3% explosion power, which, when dealing with nuclear devices, is still incredibly high. In addition, the device would need to be over 1,000 kilometers wide. The fact that so many drawbacks exist even in an ideal situation shows how much work we have to do before we can produce a device that would be sufficient for disabling nuclear devices.
Emergency response and communication can be split into three major parts: before a nuclear explosion, just after an explosion, and post-explosion. Before a nuclear explosion, we can be prepared with things such as shelters and trained professionals. Just after an explosion, professionals can direct people to shelters and host evacuation. Special teams assess the damage and update safety instructions on what the next steps will be. Post-explosion, professionals can determine when it will be safe or if it will ever be safe to return to the area, and if so, what will be limited, things such as water, soil, and crops.
There currently isn't a necessarily sophisticated way of tracking the perpetrator yet because there hasn't been a bombing since World War II. But with that in mind, there are some factors such as the crater size of the bomb that could help use to determine what type of bomb was used. Also, international conflict would probably come in a huge factor determining on which country probably could have bombed another country. With international conflicts happening, we never know what could happen. But the main factor that would probably help us the most is that our advanced satellite and drone technology is able to help track us because it's orbiting around the Earth and will be able to take pictures basically anytime, anywhere when we need it. And with the better optics, motors, armor, stealth, and cameras that could be used onto satellites and drones that are helping it advance in the coming years, it'll make it so much better and easier for us. There's also reverse missile tracking, which could also help, but that would mainly help if you knew which direction the missile came from, because then you can use math to determine which general area that was launched from, which would help. That's only if we know which direction the missile came from. And as a conclusion, this matters to all of you because nuclear terror is such a threat. One nuclear bomb can cause World War III, which will create anarchy all around the world. And with other countries that are gaining up into technology and are able to get their hands on this type of uranium and nuclear weapons, sooner or later terrorist groups such as ISIS might get weapons of mass destruction just as soon as we may know, and that will cause a huge threat to national security, and that will make it a huge issue not just for us but all around the world. USA, Russia, Europe, everywhere. Every single nation will be in a huge threat. And with all that in conclusion, are there any questions?